Welcome back, everyone, to the Tojo Dojo. Here for another episode of Pig's Ear in Review with Myshtuff and Riku Rose. How you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, mate. You?
Fantastic. So, if this is your first time watching, make sure to like and comment, subscribe. Let us know if you've been, watching and playing any of the stuff that we're about to be talking about, and also check out some of the last few episodes as well. A lot of good stuff that's been coming out. Today, we got quite a bit to talk about. A lot of exciting stuff. So we got the Resident Evil 4 remake. We got Bayonetta Origins. And, well, I guess this is also video game related. Tetris, the movie, I guess, the motion picture that we're going to be talking about. But also, really quick, something just came to mind. We're going to have to do a quick pour one out for E3. Got canceled. We just found out.
What? Yeah, I just booked my flights an hour
ago. No. Yeah, I mean, no surprise. It was canceled the last few years, and I think the announcement last year was, stay tuned, we're going to be back bigger and better than ever. And then literally no one had any interest in attending, at least from a company perspective. And so it got canceled, which was, it's a little sad to see, I got to say, because I know we've talked about how, it was a nice event that kind of brought people together, but
I enjoyed sitting there for 2 nights and watching all the news come in at once.
Mm-hmm.
There is a little bit of magic lost in that, Sony's just going to do a random show on Thursday. Nintendo, there's a direct tomorrow. You're like, oh, okay. But the reality of the situation also seeps in, where you're like, yeah, but why would you fly all the way to LA, do all these shows in person when you can just put a YouTube video up?
Yeah, the business side of it makes complete sense. And I know I've told you this before, but as a quick mention, back in 2018, we went to E3 for a quick trip. We were going out there for other reasons, my wife and I, but we were like, screw it. We're kind of here around the time. And that was the second year they allowed non-press people to come in. And so we went, and I will say it was fun, but it was definitely even if it were to continue, it was like a one and done, all right, we don't need to do that again.
They were like, look at the people we're letting in. We got to shut this down.
Yeah, this is the killer right here. So just thought I'd mention that really quick. So a bit of gaming news, because this is why people come to us here, up-to-date gaming news, clearly. So anyways, with that, so Resident Evil 4 remake. So you've obviously been on a recent Resident Evil journey.
Yeah, in the last, I want to say 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I played the remake of the first one, and then the remake of 2 and 3. I think I played between October and now.
Mm-hmm.
And quite nicely, Capcom was like, what's that? You've been playing these? Well, why don't we release Resident Evil 4 remake for you? And I was like, thank you very much.
Yes, so nice. How kind. Yeah, Resident Evil 4 is interesting. It's such a beloved game.
Yeah. I as I said, I've not played the Resident Evil games other than these remakes, but it seems like after 5 onwards is where people start getting a bit iffy on it.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So I going into this, and everyone's like, oh, one of the greatest games ever, and stuff like that. I've not played the original, so I've not really got anything to compare it to.
Sure.
But I think it's pretty great so far.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's tricky with the Resident Evil games when they get with them being remade. Obviously, they're generally speaking, the remakes have been loved, and they're modern and all that kind of stuff. There is still something to be said about those first batch of Resident Evil games. Even though they're kind of quote unquote outdated by today's standards, there is still that old school survival horror charm that certain people like. I'm me being one of them for sure. But obviously they're not for everyone. But I do think those still stand on their own if you're in the mood for that kind of game. But obviously the remakes are a little bit fancier now, right?
Well, they are still. You can still tell that these are a little old fashioned. Mechanic-wise, or just even the story in the games.
Sure.
And I don't just mean Resident Evil 4, I mean all of them at this. It's very, late 90s, early 2000s action movie cheese.
Oh, of course.
But what I have enjoyed the most is that if you play just these remakes of the games, each of them feel different.
Yeah.
They there are some series I've tried to get into, and like when you're catching up on a series by like the second or third game, you're feeling a bit of burnout because it's same thing, same thing, same thing.
Yeah.
Each of these feel different enough that it feels unique enough that you're not getting burned out on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's why people and once again, even on the original ones, that's why people liked them. Yes, they were that survival horror, but they were different settings, they had different characters, it was the same kind of overall lore, and it kept expanding in these unique sort of different areas. So I'm glad that feel is maintained with these remakes.
Yeah. It is a bit odd. I was telling you I was struggling with some of the fights because in 3 and I think in 2 you can dodge.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone comes at you, like duck out the way and step to the side.
Yeah.
And I keep hitting the circle button to do that, and I just crouch, and then they just hit a machete in my back instead of my head.
Yeah. That's actually yes, that has happened to me a few times as well. And actually, on that note, and I even think I mentioned this the other day as well. This game, I will say, is noticeably more difficult, which I was not expecting. Like, maybe it's just me, but like, there are a few times when there's like multiple zombies at once that kind of like overtake you. That like, I just died. I'm dying more than I thought I would. I guess.
I think I've died. So I'm on chapter 6. I think we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've died probably 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest. I've seen this a few times online. People saying they think it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd describe it as hard because hard makes it. Because if I mess up, generally in the next go, I know what I did and I fix it.
Oh, sure.
Because I back myself into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh crap, and they overwhelm me.
Yeah.
So next time I go in, I'm like, well, from here I'll pick them off. I've got more room. If I need to, I can run this way. Set myself up here while I pick them off. Things like that,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any section I've had to do twice. Like died twice, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and yeah, I think I would agree with that assessment. That's a good way of putting it. And I'm not saying it's hard like I'm having a bad time either. No. It's just I've noticed it is a little bit more challenging. You can't breeze through it, maybe is a different way of putting it. I will say, and once again, I'm not going to spoil it because I'm like 1 or 2 chapters ahead of you. There is one section that I think I died probably 5 times because of how it's laid out in a very kind of annoying way. It's sort of like a one-hit kill type of situation where like if you fuck up, like it's just game over, and that part kind of annoyed me, but I won't ruin it for you. I'm curious when you get to that part, which is like the next chapter for you, if you know what I'm talking about when you get there. But other than that, so far it's fine.
I mainly just feel bad as well about the amount of like Spanish people I've killed.
Oh boy! Wait till you get to Resident Evil 5.
Well, it's just more like this tiny little village, right? There's like 3 cottages and a windmill, and you're like, oh, probably like 6 people live here.
Oh yeah, that's kind of the joke as well. Like with the original one, he just comes, I started blasting and just going in and just shooting people.
I think I've killed a good 200 to 300 people.
Hey man, they're infected, all right?
Based on the amount of houses I've seen, I think I'm killing some people from neighboring villages as well.
Look, you're decimating this place.
Yeah.
But I guess. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go on. I was going to say it's nonsense. You've got to like just
of course.
be okay with it. Like,
oh yeah, but once again, that is why people in general love Resident Evil. But but more specifically, which coincidentally, that's what I was going to say next with Resident Evil 4. It has so much from the original one, like meme potential, like for years of the stupid one-liners and the nonsense. Like that's why, I mean, I already love B-movie schlock garbage anyways, and this was like feeding into that too. So it's just a fun time. And if you recall from when I talked about the demo, I was still cautiously optimistic of like, okay, are they going to have the same tone as the original? And I will say like, I think they have kept it for the most part. I will say, in line with the other remakes, it is on the more serious side, but it's not like a full-on drama by any means. There's still stupid one-liners in it, which is great. So I do think they did a good job with the tone, I will say, on this one.
Yeah. When I say it's ridiculous, I mean more just like Uncharted's ridiculous. Yeah. That guy's a mass murderer. Like,
yeah, but, like, he's just killing indigenous people.
You don't care. If this was a bad game, you'd be like, okay, this is just beyond stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know how the Resident Evil games do this, and it's sort of like what Dead Space does as well. where they always make you feel like you're just getting out of a situation with like just enough ammo, things like that. And games that do that do it so well.
Yeah.
Right, and it adds to the game so much because there's battles where like a guy with like a ox head's coming at me with a big hammer, and I'm unloading in him, and it's doing nothing, and I'm like, right, well, I've got like a grenade and like 2 bolts left. Let's see if this takes him down, and it does, and you're like, right, well, before the next fight, I got to find some stuff.
Yeah, it really makes you plan out accordingly, and it's not, and I wouldn't say that they're like bullet sponges necessarily. I've heard that criticism, not necessarily about this game, but maybe other games of like, it's just so stupid, like how much you're unloading in them. With this, like, no, it's a good balance. Like you have to plan carefully. You have to use the right weapons. Like I'm very much finding myself waiting for enemies to group together so I can throw a grenade so it like gets all of them at once, stuff like that. So you have to be smart about it, I will say.
Yeah, no, and it's also nice as well where I talk about like how the Resident Evils are different, where 2 is more like a Metroidvania type. You're looking at your map constantly, and you're like, right, well, I've got this gem. I guess I could put it in the thing over there.
Yeah.
Right, so you run over there. Right, now I've unlocked this. Now that, maybe I can go back there and I can unlock that now that I've got this, right? Resident Evil 3, the remake, was more like a linear action game.
Yeah.
This is like a halfway between the two of them, I'm feeling like. Where there's linear sections where you're just going through, like, and then like there's parts where you're like, right, well, I've got to get this and this and then bring it back here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like puzzles and collecting items and environmental kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying it. I'm gonna obviously beat the game. If we do a spoiler cast or not on that, we'll find out. I guess depends how much we have to say at the end.
Yeah.
But no, I'd give it a big thumbs up. It's really, really enjoyable. It doesn't feel like an old game.
Sure.
Like it feels very modern with older sensibilities.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, they took the best of what... I mean, that's what a good remake should do. If you're gonna... And that's the tricky thing. I would still argue this game didn't need a remake, and I think probably a lot of people would, especially who are fans of the original one. And on top of that, the damn game has been released on every platform under the sun, practically, after the original, GameCube and PS2 releases. So you can still play this technically on PS5, like the original one, if you really wanted to. And I think you should. Some people should, like, just to, because I think it does still hold up. But if they're going to remake a game, kind of like with Dead Space, they brought it forward, retooled things that kind of are outdated, connected the lore better, just made everything better. And this is another example of like they just knocked it out of the park, basically.
Yeah. Well, thumbs up from me.
Yeah, definite thumbs up for me as well. I guess the only other things as far as upcoming stuff with this game is they've already announced, I think here in the next couple weeks, the Mercenaries mode is coming, which is kind of like their like arcade shooter extra mode that they've put in like older Resident Evils.
I will not be partaking in.
It's fun. It's a good time. But the other thing though that they've hinted at though is actual story DLC, because and since you didn't play the original one, basically what happened was there was the original GameCube release, just the core game. Then when they brought it finally over, I think to PS2 or maybe like an international release, they added another like extra content pack to that release with Ada's character. And that was like a separate side story thing. But that side story isn't in this base remake yet. But there have been hints that like, okay, that's also of course coming. So I'm assuming sometime later this year that'll also come out. So
little Halloween treat.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't think it's, if I remember correctly, that was only like a small couple hour type of thing. So I'm assuming they've already been working on it, and yeah, probably later this year it'll come out or something like that. So definitely look forward to that one. But yeah, definite big thumbs up for me as well. I think they've done a great job so far. I'm curious how the rest of the game is going to pan out, because okay, there is one boss fight later in the game in the original that is just so stupidly ridiculous, and I'm sure you've probably seen pictures of it. I won't spoil it, but I'm curious how they're going to retool it for this, if they've even included it at all, to be honest.
Okay.
if we do the spoiler cast, I'll talk about that one. So we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, definite big thumbs up for me on that one as well. So.
All right, then over to you.
Yes.
For
all right.
Some sexy lady action.
Well, not this time. Not quite. It's
No?
a prequel when she's a child.
Okay then.
So that's for the later games.
I did not realize that.
So not quite this time, but close.
I'm just gonna go jump out a window.
We'll cut it, do the whole episode over. So here's the thing with Bayonetta is Bayonetta 3 came out last year, and that was after, a 5-year wait from when it was announced, which is insane. A little, I think they jumped the gun on that announcement at the Game Awards in 2017, maybe a little too soon. So of course, around the time, I think it was either when it released or shortly after, there was, I don't know, maybe a game show or awards show or whatever it was. Out of nowhere, a trailer started coming out for another Bayonetta game, and they're like, really? It took 5 years last time. Do we really want to announce another one? But they surprised everyone by saying, oh, no, it's coming in like 5 months. And I think everyone collectively was like, wait, what? Are you serious? Like, okay, that seems a little odd. So they announced it, and right from the get-go looked like it was going to be a very different game. So it's called Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. And that's because you're essentially playing as a child version of Bayonetta and kind of like how she got her powers and sort of where she started and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is, if you've seen, the Bayonetta games, those are like the high action Devil May Cry style gameplay, like guns blazing, that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, gun shoes, hand shoes, fucking hair flying everywhere, demons coming out. I mean, I love those games. Don't get me wrong, but they're absurd. They're like ridiculous, over the top games, and they're super fun. But this is not that type of game. It is very much it's kind of hard to describe, but it's essentially kind of like a platform adventure type of game, but the premise of the game is you're controlling both Cereza as well as this like cat demon, but the way you control them is independently. So like each control stick, you control them independently.
A bit
essentially,
like that Brothers game from Joseph Fares. Did you ever play that?
No, but I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah,
but
that does the same thing. Each analog controls a different brother.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, exactly then. And the control, at first, I was a little weary of that. I'm like, how is this going to work? And fortunately, the way they set up the controls are super intuitive. Your main like attacking and like powers are the triggers, and obviously the sticks for movement. And then you only use like the like D-pad and buttons to like switch maybe certain powers. So that's really all you need is the triggers and the stick. So it's actually not hard at all to control. I was actually surprised at how well they pulled it off, to be honest. But what I will say, it does take getting used to, and maybe this is just my brain, but it kept happening where like I thought I was controlling the wrong one, so I kept saying like, oh, I want to go this direction, and then both characters went like the opposite direction, and I was like, oh no, fuck, I'm controlling the wrong one.
Brain broken.
I know. So it like took me a minute to like get that, but once you get the hang of it, it's super easy. And I will say what's cool about that control style is there's some puzzles that are built around that, where like you either have to move them simultaneously, but like in different parts of the map, or like kind of back and forth for certain puzzles and stuff like that. So it was like a really super unique kind of control scheme. I guess I just haven't tried something like that before. But as far as the art style, though, that's what really hooked me as well, because the best way I can describe the art is it's kind of like a mix between Wind Waker and Psychonauts is like the closest thing that I can like describe. It's like part cell shading, part like surrealistic art. Like it's very unique art style. Yeah, it's very odd. Yeah. So as far as the story goes, I mean, it's really, once again, Cereza getting her powers and trying to figure it out, and you're like exploring these magical forests. It's almost like laid out kind of like a children's book a little bit, where it's like a very storybook kind of turning through the pages. So like it's a very unique, like just overall art style basically. But really at the end of the day, platformer, there's some fighting. I mean, it's almost like a toned down version of the Bayonetta games, to be honest. Like you're still...
When I saw it like announced, it looked to me like, do you remember like during the 360 era where you used to get those arcade games?
Yeah.
before like indie games started looking like AAA games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it looked more like that, and I miss that kind of smaller couple of hour game for $15 type era, as well as all AAA whatever's.
Yeah, it was cool. So I will say this game actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think it took me 12 or 13 hours, so it was a little bit
That's a
longer.
decent
So
chunk,
yeah, it definitely wasn't like super short, but it was a good size game for sure. Yeah, and I guess in general to me, what was cool is the fact that you had these core Bayonetta games that clearly follow a very distinct type of style and what those Bayonetta games are. But then this game, you can tell that there's like a DNA of that in this game, but it's still a very different style game. Like you I mean, it's a prequel, which is nice. So if you wanted to start with the Bayonetta games, you could now start with this if you wanted to. But regardless of that, like you can sort of play it on its own if you just maybe didn't like the Bayonetta games for some reason, like with that gameplay style. That has no bearing on this game. It's a very different kind of game. So I guess the other thing I'll mention is it has some really interesting ways of changing the difficulty. Like normally when you're playing a game and you want to make something easier or harder, it's like, oh, the bosses have more health or you do more damage, stuff like that. But with this game, they have different toggles for how like your powers work to make them less or potentially more difficult. Of like, instead of doing almost like mini QTEs, they're kind of more automated, or just like little stuff like that. I mean, for anyone who cares about that, I just thought it was interesting. It was nice to just see other ways of changing difficulty other than like, oh, health bar and attack or something like that. So, but yeah, no, I was not. I mean, I didn't expect to like hate this game or anything, but I was like, I didn't really know what to think of this when it got announced. It just like kind of came out of nowhere. It was very radically different, but I had a blast playing this game. It was super fun, and I think what would be good if we go back to our last episode, we were talking about Like a Dragon. That's a series that basically is just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. This is a good demonstration of, okay, there was 3 Bayonetta games, and yeah, they did things different and they were great. Did I really need a Bayonetta 4? Not really. But they made this, which was very radically different, still part of the Bayonetta series, and it was amazing. Like they just took a chance and they knocked it out of the park. Like, and it's getting great reviews from a lot of people too.
You can do different genres with different things.
I know, right? Especially if you have especially with a world as ridiculous and outlandish as Bayonetta, there are so many different ways you could take this. There's so many other spin-offs that you could do in prequels. And so to be honest, because of the success of this, I think they've even said like this could mark now a new like parallel series of Bayonetta, whether it's the same or something else, who knows. So yeah, I mean, I hope developers take note of like, yeah, you can take chances with your universe by doing something else if you put your heart into it and like do something interesting.
Don't ship it out to another studio and just say like, "I'll do this quick and cheap."
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, definite huge thumbs up. This was awesome, and even if you haven't played the Bayonetta games, you could try this. Like I said, just because it is a prequel, but also it's a very different kind of game, so you might like it maybe more than the other Bayonetta games. And I hope to see more from Bayonetta, and I don't think they've announced more surprises anytime soon, so we'll see if anything
Next
comes
Game
out.
Awards, they're coming out, it'll be like Kojima is now making a new Bayonetta game.
Yeah, coming on the PlayStation 8. Keep your pre-orders ready. So, but yeah, anyways, thumbs up, and yeah, I think that's about it. Over to you.
Over to me. So, last night, the Tetris movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
A movie that everyone's been waiting for
decades. Clearly.
Yeah. And I think we always see these like news articles where it's like a Tetris movie, a Monopoly movie, and you're like, what? How's that going to work?
Battleship.
Yeah. But this one is about the story behind like how Tetris was made and how it was introduced to the West, which I don't know how familiar you are with that story.
I am, mainly because one of the YouTube channels that I love to watch is a guy called Gaming Historian. If you haven't, for anyone who hasn't checked him out, it's almost like PBS documentaries, but about video games. And he actually, a couple years ago, did an hour-long video about I believe, what this movie is about. So I haven't watched this movie, but it's basically this story, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is actually insane, and there's so many parts to this where you're like, wait, that wouldn't happen in the real world, but
right.
You know, like, but then also with this movie, because it is a Hollywood movie, there are things where you go, I don't think the executives of Nintendo got in a car chase in the middle of Moscow.
Or did they?
Yeah, I don't think that, you know, like the ending of Argo where they got to like get on the plane and stuff like that.
Tetris blocks falling. Yeah.
No, like for a good like 3/4 of this movie, you're probably like, yeah, this is like pretty close. Obviously, it's still got that Hollywood little sprinkle to it.
Mm-hmm.
This movie was fun. Taron Egerton is a great actor. I actually really enjoyed the Elton John movie he did, Rocket Man.
I loved him in that. Yep.
I thought that was great. So I saw that he was in this and what the story it was about, and I was like, oh yeah, this actually looks really interesting. There is a good story to tell there. I think it's a bit of a shame. It's just okay. It's not great. It's not fantastic. Taron Egerton is very much doing a very by the books performance. He's not doing anything special, which I know he can do. Is
he playing Alexei Pajitnov? Like the main guy?
He's playing what's his name? The guy who like bought it off them.
Okay. I wasn't sure like what angle they were taking exactly.
No. So he's the main character, and he's like, you know, at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah.
And he sees Tetris, and he's like, what is this? And he becomes obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And then he realizes the rights are a bit shadier outside the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Than they actually seem. So he like goes to Moscow to try and actually officially get the rights, because Alexei didn't actually own the rights, because with it being the Soviet Union, a communist country, anything he made, the government owned.
Yep.
And it's him essentially negotiating with the Soviet Union as a whole.
Yeah, like KGB agents and shit.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's weird about this. So did you ever see that movie, The Founder, with Michael Keaton?
Yeah.
Where he was like the McDonald's guy, right?
Right.
And he's a bit wacky. He's a bit out there. He constantly throws his money at this because he believes in it so much.
Right.
Taron Egerton's side is like that, right?
Okay.
He's constantly like just walking into Nintendo without a meeting and like throwing a copy of Tetris at like Yamauchi, who like is like, oh yes, I like this very much. Let's buy it.
Yeah.
You know, like obviously stuff that didn't happen. I'm sure he actually did arrange a meeting in real life.
I'm curious if you happen to know, was Nintendo involved in this movie at all?
I feel like they must have been in some way, which is bizarre,
right?
Because there is a point where a Nintendo executive drops the F-bomb, and I was just like, and it's about another company.
Oh, perfect.
And I was like, I don't feel like Nintendo would be okay with that.
Okay, so probably not. I mean, not that they have to per se, but
in it, they're like they show the Game Boy and the NES.
That's a good
point.
point.
They've got to sign off in some way. I don't know the legalities of it.
Yeah,
but
I'm just
I feel
curious.
like they had to have signed off in some way, and especially because there's Nintendo executives being portrayed by people. I feel like you've got to get their permission, right?
Yeah, fair use laws with this kind of stuff. I have no idea how that works. So yeah,
but this is it. So Taron Egerton's side is very, as I said, whimsical, American dream. You can do anything, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't quite fit with the Alexei side, which is Soviet Union, KGB's knocking people's doors down, hauling them away because they look at someone wrong.
Like it doesn't fit in the sense of like the movie, like tonally, it's kind of weird, or
it's very tonally weird because this is it. Is like he, as I said, he's like every time like he goes from a different country, from like Japan to Seattle, it does like a little 8-bit like graphic.
Of course it does.
Like, the plane, because it's trying to be cute and everything.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But then it cut to like Alexei like eating porridge in his house and like and it's all grey. And, like, people are banging on the door and they're like hiding the kids and stuff.
Jesus Christ!
You know, like that's the thing. Is kind of, it needed a pick of tone. I feel like it couldn't.
Yeah.
It got a bit wacky as well when like he comes to Russia, and I guess it's kind of like dumb American not realizing what he's getting himself into, right?
Right.
It didn't fit because on one half, that film I said earlier, Argo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that one, the Ben Affleck one?
I think I've seen parts of it, but it's been so long, to be honest.
It's like the tensest movie ever, right?
Okay.
Like, you know, like Uncut Gems, where you're just constantly like, oh, something's going to go wrong here.
Something's
going to go wrong here, right? This has moments of that where, like, you feel like if someone says the wrong thing here, or this KGB agent could just kill him if he wants to.
Right.
It just depends how he feels, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has moments like that, and I kind of think it should have stuck with that, because this isn't so much a movie about Tetris. This is more a movie about the USSR and its effect on people that live there, which I think is more interesting necessarily than just Tetris. But they,
well, especially in today's environment, Jesus.
Yeah. Tetris is a good like build. No pun intended. Building block.
Right? There it is. You said the words.
Yeah, to build that sort of story around, because it is one of the more unique things. People think of Tetris as this dumb video game, but it was actually quite revolutionary in the way that it came out of Russia. Not many things came out of Russia back then.
And I mean, it took people by storm. It was a whole craze. People were losing their minds over it here. You know, the Tetris effect.
They even mention this in the movie, like, you know, because Robert Maxwell, who is a big media Mongol, who is actually the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. Is that how you say her name?
I don't. I've never heard a correct pronunciation.
Yeah, the Jeffrey Epstein's missus.
Yeah.
All right. And he's like one of the bad guys in this movie.
Oh my god.
Yeah. But he legit says like, oh, you know, I'll trade you your country, my company's encyclopedias for Tetris. And he like even says like, you know, if you sell Tetris, it tells the rest of the world that communism doesn't work and the USSR's falling.
Interesting.
Right? And they're like, but everyone who's high up knows the Soviet Union's falling apart.
Sure.
Because it was at that point, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's more a take on the Soviet Union falling apart and it starting to become part of the capitalistic world that it is part of now to a degree.
Yeah, it's an interesting hook, and actually, I just realized it's a very weird connection here because I can't remember if I mentioned this recently. I finished reading the Elton John biography, like the book that he came out with last year. So speaking of Taran, and he has a section of where he did a concert in USSR in like I think early to mid 80s, and he was also talking of like I shouldn't be here, like me, like a gay man of all people, doing a performance in USSR. But it was more he was talking about like that the Iron Curtain and like the craziness going on with like secret agents, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting when. Because like you watch like History Channel stuff and it's always, you know, like boring kind of military type of stuff. But then you get these weird hooks like Elton John performing or like Tetris, and you get like a weird peek into that era, but from like a very different perspective, I guess.
Yeah, it's like North Korea is the closest thing to it now.
Sure.
But it is a really interesting story. I think they needed to kind of figure out their tone a bit more with this movie. It was a good movie. As I said, I don't think it was fantastic.
How long was it?
2 hours.
Okay. Getting up there a little bit.
That was it. I was surprised it was that long. Well, like, you know, when you click the movie, it says 2 hours or whatever. I felt like I'd been watching it, and not in a bad way. I felt like it was like I'd been watching it a lot longer than I had, because I was like, how long's left? And there was like an hour left. I was like, oh.
Jesus.
But I was enjoying it.
Yeah.
So, you know, anyone who likes video games and like the history of them and that is going to love this movie. Because, as I said, for a good amount of it, it is pretty true, even though the exact things that happen aren't like one for one. The general gist of the story is what actually happened, right?
Not Michael Bay explosions coming out.
No, honestly, that's just right at the end, which I still think they could have toned it down, and it would have seemed less ridiculous.
Yeah, of course.
But no, if you aren't interested in the movie, I've not seen that game in history and video, but I have heard about the history of Tetris and how it came to the West.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, I'd definitely suggest looking into that stuff because it is just a bonkers story entirely.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I mean, I'm gonna watch this movie, hopefully in the near future, anyways, for sure. But yeah, if people want a more like PBS documentary, like actual deep dive, yeah, highly recommend watching that video. It's like an hour long too. Like, he put a shit ton of work into that video. Like, it's a proper documentary. So if you want to get the more like actual world version, go watch that. But I'm sure watching this movie is still fun enough.
Yeah, I feel like if I'd watched this with my wife, she would be able to just tell on her own. Okay, well that clearly didn't happen. Like,
if this Tetris block goes under 55 miles per hour, we're gonna all fucking die.
The after credits where Sam Jackson turns up and invites the Tetris block to join the Smash Bros initiative.
That's a good point. We got the Mario movie coming out soon. Yeah. It's got to start somewhere. Wait, who would be
Reynolds as Pikachu?
That's a good point. I forgot about that. Who would be the Nintendo's version of Nick Fury? Is there an analog to that?
I guess it would be like Miyamoto.
Oh my god, it's perfect. That's genius. Come on, it writes itself, people. Yeah. Let's go. Come on. That's great. Well, good.
I'll give it a thumbs up. It's not like this ring endorsement. Don't drop everything you're doing to go watch it.
Yeah.
If this movie, like the trailers or just what it is, interests you, then yeah, give it a go. I don't think anyone's going to come away from this being like, this movie is awful, it's stupid, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll have to. I think I'd also, like I said the other day, there's now a few things on Apple that I've like banked up that I need to watch, and this is now one of them. So probably here sometime in the next 3-4 weeks, I'm going to resubscribe to Apple to watch a few different things, but this for sure being one of them. So that's good though. So nice. Right. Well, cool. So yeah, sounds like we had some good recommendations of the Resident Evil, Bayonetta, and Tetris. Yeah, curious what everyone else thought. If you happen to watch or play any of this stuff, so if you have, let us know. Leave some comments below. Let us know your Tetris high score. How many lines have you cleared in your latest game?
1 million.
Millions. So yeah, until next time though, take it easy, and thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.